From west of the Rockies, dial 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222. Or use the wildcard line at 1-775-727-1295. To reach Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell on the Premier Radio Network.
Actually, this is Ghost to Ghost AM. Your calls only all night long. In a moment, we'll get right back to it. This is Halloween. Go ahead. Turn the lights down, and let's go. On my guest line, you're on the air. Ghost to Ghost AM. Hi. Hello there.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
What is your first name?
Cindy.
Cindy.
And I live in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas.
I'm listening on Cliff.
Okay.
Well, I had emailed my story into you, and it's not that it's so scary, but I think it's a message from beyond, definitely.
That'll do.
Okay. Well, about 12 years ago, my father passed away unexpectedly. He had a heart attack, and so he wasn't able to say goodbye to my sister and myself.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting is that for 35 years he had worked for Oscar Mayer Company.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us know that that's the manufacturing plant where they make the different lunch meats, hot dogs, etc.
I think hot dogs when you say hot.
Exactly,
yeah.
Hot dogs. So when we were little children in the 60s, my dad would always bring home, and anyone who grew up in the Midwest would probably remember this, these little red weenie whistles.
Of course.
Are you familiar with those?
Yes, of course. I remember
And they had
them.
the little holes, and you would blow, and you played a little musical song.
Right.
And on, like, hot dog packages, they have the little Weenie Mobile on, if you ever looked at the front of Oscar Mayer hot dog package. Well, anyway, so that was our family's joke growing up as kids. We always had these red weenie whistles in the 60s and 70s all over the house, and we'd play the little song, and that was just our little family thing. So fast forward to when my father passes away. And I called my sister, and I told my sister that my father had died. She lived in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
So she was driving up to Iowa to go to the funeral. And when she got to the funeral, I was already there, and she just kind of looked upset and kind of bewildered. And I talked to her, and I said, well, what's wrong besides we're coming to the funeral? And she said, Cindy, the weirdest thing has happened. She goes, on my way driving from St. Louis to Iowa, as I was driving down the highway, this huge Weenie Mobile was driving toward me, the promotional car.
Yes.
And she said, if that isn't a message from Dad, I don't know what is, because we didn't get to say goodbye to him. And so I said, well, that is really strange, because most people in their lifetime will never see this car that drives around with a big hot dog on top. And so that kind of tweaked her out, but she felt it was a message. Well, I'm a school teacher. And after the funeral, I came back to Dallas, and my first day back at school, I'm a high school art teacher. One of my students was looking through a big box of old magazines for an idea for an art project.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my first day back from the funeral. Out of the blue, the student says to me, I don't know why, but I just found a picture in an old magazine of a Weenie Mobile.
I know. That might do it for me.
And he calls me over, and he says, look at this.
Yes.
And it was just an old magazine that, I keep in the classroom, probably from the 70s, 80s kind of thing, that the kids can cut up. And here was that same promotional car that my sister had driven by on the way to the funeral.
That's a little much.
Well, it gets even weirder, because then this student looked at me and he said, I don't know why, but I'm just compelled. I'm going to draw this for my art project. And he goes, his exact words were, I can't even explain to you why I'm going to do this, but I'm going to draw this for you.
Yes.
And it gets weirder. The student's name was Chris, and my father's name was Chris.
Uh-huh.
Now, it gets a little more strange. I'm almost finished.
Okay.
I decide I'm going to show my mother this picture that this kid has drawn of this Weenie Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have it in my hands, and I come home, and my mother watched my daughter, who was about 7 at the time. And so my little girl comes running up to me as I have this picture of a Weenie Mobile in my hand. And she was like, Mommy, look what Grandma found and Grandma gave me today. And I said, what's that? And she opened her hand, and she had the little red weenie whistle in her hand. And in my hand, I'm holding a drawing from a student of this Wiener Mobile.
Yes.
And so the two of us just kind of looked at each other, and I was like, I don't think a message from beyond can be any louder,
any clearer, yes,
than that.
Well, that's wonderful, and that's right. I think that our loved ones, when they get to the other side, depending on what they're able to do, they get messages back, and that was one of those.
And just a quick and brief note how weird this is. Last night I was watching TV, and I was wondering if maybe my story would get on your show. Last night I was watching television, and there was a little clip for a show coming up, and on this clip it's about the red Weenie Mobile. And when I saw it last night, I just knew. I said, I'll be on your show tonight telling the story.
And so you have been. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, take care. Well, there you have it. Well, yes, what would be, think about it for a second. Aside from the fact that you would realize you are dead, and that would be some very serious realization, I suppose, for you, what would you first want to do? And the answer is you'd want to get hold of your relatives, or at the very least send them some kind of message. And, of course, that's exactly what that was. Now, a slightly circuitous route, to be sure, but nevertheless, a message. And that's what you may be wanting to do when you get to the other side. You may want to send a message back, and it may not be easy. Manifestation may be very difficult. And the kind of message that this lady got, perhaps that's something you can do. You're on the air, Ghost to Ghost AM, on the first-time caller line. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. What is your first name?
My name's Colleen.
Colleen, what's up?
Well, I live on the eastern shore of Maryland, on Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
And I'm a director of nursing for an assisted living facility.
Oh, yes.
And where I work is a very old building. It's over 100 years old. We celebrated our 100-year anniversary this past June. And the original structure of the building was a gift from a former governor of Maine to his daughter, who was a young bride at the time. And the home has two large wings on either side of it, and this is where the residents live in this assisted living building. Right after I started working there, the residents, several of them, would come to me and complain of a young boy that kept pestering them, bothering them, telling them to go places they weren't supposed to go, pushing, going in the elevator, and the buttons would go up and down, and he would climb up on top of their dressers and taunt them, and he was just a bothersome
a young boy out of nowhere. This is a place where older people are. It's assisted living, right? So
right.
There shouldn't be any children.
At first I thought it was a family visiting, and this little boy was part of the family. So as I would go up to investigate this little boy who was bugging them so much, I would say, well, please tell me where he is, and I'll go talk to the family and see if they can keep him in better control.
Sure.
Well, they would point, of course, and there was no little boy there, and I'd be like, well, where is he? And they would say, over there, can't you see him? He's in the elevator, or he's on top of my dresser. Please take him away.
And all of these older people would be seeing him, and you wouldn't?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So I started to get the hair rising on the back of my neck, thinking, okay, am I the one, who's seeing weird or feeling weird here? Is it just, is it somebody else? But I would talk to employees who've worked there for over 20 years and say, the weirdest thing happened to me today, and I would tell my story, and they would be like, so you're going to get to see the little boy too. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, this little boy has been showing himself, at least as long as we've been here, and probably longer. And what we think he is, or who we think he is the young son of the bride who the home was given to, because apparently she had several boys, and the youngest one had died at an early age. We don't know what from, but it's a little weird when you're walking down the hall and you see the elevator door pop open and no one's there.
Yeah, well, you see, it does seem as though we tend to stay in the surroundings of the place where we died, so actually that does make sense. Did you ever see this young boy yourself?
I've never seen him, no. I would love to.
You really want to?
Well, yeah, sure I do. And, there's many ghosts there, and there's many stories, and I have a resident who won't even sleep in her bed. She's been there for over 2 years, and she refuses to sleep in the bed because she swears the bed moves when she's in it. And to prove to her, that there was nothing wrong with the bed, I laid down in it, and I was like, okay, well, this is a normal bed. It doesn't move, but, it's the Alzheimer's patients mostly. And I often think, do they have some connection that we don't?
Boy, there's
they start losing
a really a really good question. Thank you very, very much. It's a really good question. Do you suppose in life that when we begin losing some of our faculties, as would have been the case in the story she just told, and with the people she deals with, that our brain in some way makes up for the loss of those faculties by giving us some additional ability? As in, I see a dead person. Maybe not dead people, but a dead person, one who's been in residence here since he died here. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Ghost to Ghost AM. Hi.
Hi, Art.
How are you?
I'm fine. This is Pat in Houston.
Pat in Houston. Hi, Pat.
Are you having a happy Halloween?
Well,
it's a ghostly Halloween.
That's right. I prefer exactly what we're doing right now, Pat. What's up?
Well, this is a story that happened to me several years ago. We had some very good friends, and our husbands decided to go hunting one weekend. My friends had just been able to buy a brand new house in a very plush, exclusive part of Houston.
Uh-huh.
And it was a very expensive house, and we were very young, and so I wanted to go spend the night and see how her house was.
Sure.
Okay, so it was raining that weekend, like it can rain in Houston in the coastal areas. You know, it just rains and rains, and our husbands went on and went hunting, but my friend had told me that I may not want to stay with her that night because weird things had been happening in her house. And I told her, oh, you know, nothing scares me. I was young then, and I welcomed the time to go spend with her and her daughter. So we ate supper, and it got dark, and we went to bed. Well, their house was a long contemporary ranch-style house with one big bedroom on one end and the living room in the middle and the kitchen on the other end with an attached garage. Well, we talked for a while, and then we went to sleep, and I woke up all of a sudden. Both of our daughters were just screaming loudly.
Oh.
They were in a little nursery that was kind of attached on the side of the bedroom we were in.
Yes.
So I jumped up to go see what was wrong with them, but as I was getting out of the bed, I felt a cold feeling just start from one side of me on my right side. And it must have taken maybe 10 seconds to go pass all the way through my body. It was the coldest that I've ever been in my life. It's just really hard to describe.
And you could actually feel it moving across your body.
It was like you were just, I don't know how to even explain it. You were just frozen. You just couldn't do anything except experience that really terrific coldness.
You're doing fine.
Yes. And so it left, and I got up to see what the girls were doing, and they were quiet by then. But as I was checking them, there was a terrible pounding on the living room front door. And so I started to go to the front door, and my friend started just sobbing, just saying, please don't go to the front door. Don't go, don't go. It won't do any good. And I was like, well, I'm going to go see who's at the door. Well, then the pounding kind of moved around to the garage door.
You're like every lady who dies in any horror flick I've ever seen. Yeah, sure, let's go to the basement. Well, let's go open the door.
See who's out there with the butcher knife, right?
That's right. That's right. So you go to the door, huh?
Right. So I headed for the kitchen to go to the garage door because that's where the pounding was. Well, then the pounding stopped there, and I looked over to my right, and there were big patio doors looking out at their big backyard. And there was huge, just pounding, just frantic pounding, like the glass would almost break.
Yeah.
But when I looked, there was nobody there. So by this time, I was really kind of afraid, and my friend was going,
well, it's about time.
Just come back, don't go. But I did. I called the police. I called 911 and got the police, and it was a very exclusive part of Houston, so they were there as fast as you could put the phone down almost. And I let them in to the house because they wanted to check it out. And my friend was going, oh, please, please, no one is here. Just won't do any good. She was hysterical by then.
Yeah.
So the police checked the doors, and they decided to walk around the perimeter of the house. Well, it had been raining so much. There were no footprints outside at all.
Right.
But they could hear the pounding on the garage door to the kitchen. So they came into the garage, to the kitchen, and tried to open the garage door.
Yes.
They could not even wedge that door open. My friends had not unpacked all their boxes, and the garage was just stuffed to the rafters with packing boxes. And so bad that the police could not even wedge the door open.
Right.
So they said, well, we'll go check around at the patio door. So they went to look there, and there was nobody there at all. But when the policemen saw my friend, they remembered that they had been there once before, but they had never been able to find anybody at the house. So my friend said, okay, you can leave. You know, it'll be okay now. We never hear this more than once a night. So I said, what do you mean? You never hear this more than once a night? Well, it seems that the original owner that had the house had hung herself in the kitchen.
This is like the third or the fourth suicide. It seems like suicides, for some reason, are more likely to remain than others. That should be telling. That's a strong message, I think. So she had hung herself.
She hung herself in the kitchen, and her husband he traveled a lot, or he went hunting like our husbands did. He was not home an awful lot.
Yes.
But when he got home that night, he tried to get into the house, and it was all bolted on the inside. And he went around to the patio doors and looked into the kitchen, and he could see that she was hung, that she was dead, hanging. So he shot himself in the backyard that night.
Oh, my God.
And that's what we think the pounding on the door was his ghost trying to get in to help her.
All right. I really appreciate your story. Thank you. And there's so many aspects of that I think are right on the money. The fact that there already tonight, how many have we heard that were suicides? So that must mean there's a greater chance. It must mean there's a greater chance for suicides to remain or be forced to remain. We don't know the nature of the other side, or even that represents the other side. It may be a kind of a hellish place where people who do that kind of thing, commit suicide, remain. I don't know. And the other, of course, is that things continue to repeat. It may well be that the hell you enter when you do something like that is that you are then forced to repeat for eternity. I'll put a question mark there. That act that got you there. Night after night after night. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. What is your...
Tom.
Tom, okay. Where are you, Tom?
I'm from Chicago.
Okay.
This happened approximately about 11 years ago.
Yes, Tom.
It's around 3 in the morning. I was coming home from a party with a friend. We're driving down Roberts Road, and I know you're thinking Resurrection Mary, but this has nothing to do with Resurrection Mary.
Okay.
There's somebody standing by the curb with a lantern, and he got in front of the car, and we slowed down. He walked towards the car. We looked. He had one. It was February. He had like one of his arms was out, like a bandage was hanging, and it was like stained. It looked like maybe blood, whatever. This was like really gruesome looking. His mouth was agape. His eyes were like rolled in back of his head. His leg was missing.
Oh,
and you could see like a translucency through him. We just looked at each other and just like, whoa. We drove on. He walked in back of the car, and the other car, we looked in back, and the other car just went right through him.
Went right through him?
Went right through him.
And I'm sorry, who was with you? Who saw it?
A friend. We were in a car.
And you both saw it?
We both saw it, and he was right by the side of us. We drove, and then he continued to walk across the street, and there was another cemetery. It was Bethany. He was walking to the other cemetery, and there was another car in back that drove right through this apparition. I mean, that blew me away. I was like, for like a year, I'm telling you.
So there's no doubt in your mind then about ghosts, right?
Oh no, I have so many paranormal experiences, But that was probably the most spooked out one I've ever had.
Well, of course. I mean, when you see that with your own eyes, and
I had a witness too.
And then another set of eyes sees it.
And then we called Justice Police, and they didn't want to, get into it. And then I called Richard Crow.
Well, can you blame them?
Of course.
They want bodies.
Of course.
Yeah, they want bodies.
Right? Well, call Art Bell from west of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies at 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222. The wildcard line is open at 1-775-727-1295. And to reach Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell on the Premier Radio Network.
Coast to Coast AM, actually. I am Art Bell, and we may expand this program to 5 hours tonight. I'm beginning to like your stories a lot. You're doing very well. So that's all we're doing tonight, by the way. We're telling ghost stories. They're your stories. No official guest, just all of you, and in just a very short moment, we'll get back to it. Mike in San Diego, Fast Blast Art. Time supposedly does not exist in the spirit world. So what the heck does the word eternity mean to a ghost? So if a person goes to hell for eternity, then what would that mean to a spirit that has gone to hell for committing suicide? I don't know, Mike. I just know what I'm hearing, and as you listen to these stories, an awful lot of them involve suicides. And time, well, it may mean nothing, but how could you have a punishment for eternity without realization and understanding that you're in this for eternity? West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hi.
Hi, Art.
Hello. What is your first name?
I'm Elizabeth, and I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona.
All right, Elizabeth.
And, before I forget to tell you, if you're ever in Phoenix, there's a haunted restaurant you may be interested in. They have good food and about 20 ghosts.
Good food and 20 ghosts?
At least.
All right.
But anyway, I've also had numerous ghost encounters ever since I was about 6 years old. I go on record now, I don't like them. But the one I'm going to tell you about involves my late brother.
All right.
And before he died, he lived in northern Arizona, and I'm down here in Phoenix, of course, and he had been going through some marital problems. And my mama lived with me at the time, too, me and my baby, and he had asked, could he move back in with us while he got a divorce? And, of course, I said, yes, of course, you can.
Mm-hmm.
But I told him, I want to be with you when you pack your things. Something just told me I needed to be there.
Yes.
And he had promised, at the time he was driving for a trucking firm, and he had promised he would come get me, and, I just wanted to be there. I wanted to watch his back, basically.
Okay. All right.
Well, on August 5, 1995, I had worked night shift, and, so I didn't get to bed till like about 5 o'clock that morning. And at about 11:20,
You've got your radio on, don't you?
It's in the other room.
Yes, you shouldn't have a radio on. It's very confusing. But go ahead. You woke up.
Yeah, well, I just woke up. I had a most god-awful, horrible, sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I had such a blinding pain. I mean, a very hot, burning pain in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had migraines before, and this was not like any migraine, and it lasted for several minutes. And I just knew that something was wrong, that something awful was happening, but I didn't know what. And then about 3 hours later, I got the news that my brother had been shot.
So that was it. You knew, in other words, you knew?
I just knew something
had to happen.
I knew something awful was happening. Well, I went up to the hospital where he was at. And like I said, it was a 4-hour drive, and that'll make sense to you in a minute. And he had left a living will, and I was with him when they disconnected the life support. They couldn't get me out of the room.
He was brain dead.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But I couldn't be there, to watch his body die. I just couldn't face that.
I understand.
And then finally on August 8th, I got the news that he had died, and it was like I got the news at 7:15. They said he had died at 7:05.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my mom and I were just totally devastated. And I managed to get her to bed in her room, and then I went to bed in my room, and I was just in my room, and I was just, crying my heart out.
Yes.
And I thought my mom had gone to sleep also, so I wasn't even thinking anything. But then at 11:05, exactly 4 hours after he was pronounced dead, I heard the kitchen door open, and I heard it slam shut. And I heard my brother call out, "Mom, Beth, I'm home."
Uh-huh.
And I remember looking up because, my clock was right there by my bed, and I'm like, that's wishful thinking. It's just wishful thinking. And I literally cried until I cried myself to sleep. And the next morning, I went in to check on my mom, and she had been awake all night just crying and crying. And I was just trying to comfort her. And then she said, "Beth, last night I heard the kitchen door open, and I heard it slam, and I heard Lonnie call out, 'Mom, Beth, I'm home.'"
Huh.
And I said, "What time was that?" And she said, "I looked at my clock. It was 11:05.
Well, gee, what can I say? I guess he did come home one more time, huh?
Yeah, he did.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Maybe until you realize you are dead, you do something regular. I don't know. I mean, if you're able to in the next life, maybe you do that. Maybe you go home. Maybe you go to work. Maybe you keep headed toward, if you were on the way to somewhere and had a car accident, maybe your body just keeps going toward its goal. You shake it off, and even though you're dead, you just keep going to do the next thing you were going to do until, of course, you realize. You're on the air, Ghost to Ghost AM. Hi.
Hello, Art.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm fine. What is your first name?
It's Steve.
Okay.
I'm calling from Vista, California.
All right, Steve.
And this is a pretty scary one.
Good. That's what I'm looking for. Go right ahead.
I have a friend. She's from Tijuana, Mexico. It happened, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. This happened in her neighborhood. And, I don't like telling this, but I almost have an obligation. There was a neighborhood party, kids about 20 years old and up.
Sure.
And, they do what typical Mexicans do there, listen to music, eat, drink beer. And one of the people at the party brought out a Ouija board, and I'll refer to it as a Ouija. That's what they call it. And they started playing. There was probably, I think she said 15 people there.
Yes.
And they're all from the same neighborhood. So they were playing it, and people were asking questions, pretty neutral questions. And there was one guy who was pretty machismo. Maybe he had too many drinks. I don't know. He started calling this Ouija out. He was, I won't use the word, but he was saying, "F you, Ouija."
Mm-hmm.
Ouija is a mentiroso, which is a liar.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is not wise.
No, it's not.
I'm not even Mexican, and I don't, but I know that. That's not smart.
Yes, it's not smart. And so this went on, and he kept doing this, and he wanted to be confrontational with this thing.
Yeah.
And he's, they said, "Okay, that's enough. Let's put this away." And he goes, "No, I insist. I want to play. Yo quiero jugar. I want to play."
Yeah.
So he started playing, and he asked the neutral questions at first. And he would respond by saying, "You're a liar," or, cuss it out again.
Yes.
And he asked a question I don't think he should have asked. He asked the Ouija, "Do you know when I'm going to die?"
Uh-huh.
And it was matter of fact. It spelled out Claro que sí, which is of course. And he called it a liar again.
Yeah?
And he said, "Okay, if you know, you liar," he called it.
Uh-huh.
"When?" And the Ouija spelled out in esta noche, which is this night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah. So
you just don't do that. And so now what happened to our friend?
Well, his girlfriend was crying hysterically, like, "Stop this, I'm getting scared." And he's like, "I'm not scared. This is nothing." And so I think my friend told me, like, they all started going home maybe like at 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
And Tijuana is a kind of a hilly area, and I
know it well. I work there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I saw where this happened too, and I saw the house where this party occurred.
And so what happened to him?
He was walking across the street, and it was like it's hard to describe, but there's like a curve, and then it goes downhill.
You don't have to describe it. What happened to him?
He got hit by a truck and killed.
Yeah, it figures. Well, you don't do that. You really don't do that. Thank you very much. A Ouija board, whatever else, I won't say a lot about it because I, years ago, had an experience with a Ouija board that I really will not discuss. But I will tell you this much. It's absolutely a conduit to somewhere else. And I'm not so sure that it's the Ouija board itself, but it's you. I suppose it could be a slab of anything, but if you're inviting contact, if you're asking for contact, then you're very likely going to get it. At the very least, you're going to open a corridor to somebody or something somewhere and, cussing it out and calling it out, in essence, wouldn't be such a good idea. And asking it when you're going to die, even less of a good idea. And well, there you go. So I wonder if what you might call out on the other end has the power to, let's say, change what would have been your date otherwise. Because that was just too good an answer this night. So do we conclude from that whatever was on the other side had the power to arrange the date and had about enough? You're on the air, Coast to Coast AM with Ghost to Ghost AM, rather, with Art Bell. Hi. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Hey.
Your name is?
Brad.
Hey, Brad.
And listening to you here in Phoenix on Mighty Streamlink.
Oh, yes.
And the story I have is it's not so much a terrifying one, but a spooky one, nonetheless. My grandfather passed away when I was about 15, and he was an unusual guy. The best way to describe him would probably be as a little bit ornery. He was 77 when he died, and he was still.
You're in the right to be ornery.
Exactly.
By 77.
Yeah, and he was still, telling funny jokes and pulling pranks and grabbing the dog's tail when it walked by, and he was an interesting guy. And he had a heart attack, and he was in a coma. And of course, the whole family gathered, went to upstate New York and gathered around him. And my sister was there, and she had recently gotten married, and she was the apple of his eye. They were just so very close.
Oh, yes.
And she had planned a trip to go overseas with her new husband, and they planned a trip to go to Israel. And, things were up in the air. Obviously, they don't know exactly what's going to happen. And in that situation, the prognosis wasn't good. And my mom told my sister, it would be best if you went. He would want you to, keep your plans and go ahead and go.
Yes.
And reluctantly, she, got on the plane with her husband, and they took the trip. And I believe the day that they arrived, they were sleeping off, the jet lag and everything. So I think it's like a 15-hour flight.
Sure.
And my brother-in-law he'd worked on Wall Street for a while, so needless to say, he was a commodities trader. He had a lot of money. And he bought a Concorde watch before he left. And it was a brand-new watch, and they're quite expensive. Mm-hmm. And he noticed that the watch had stopped. And, shortly thereafter, they're getting gathered or whatever, and my mom called and, let them know that my grandfather had indeed passed away, and that, they were starting to get the details and everything, and found out that he passed away at exactly the same time as my brother-in-law's watch had stopped.
Huh.
And the spookiest part of all is my grandfather was a watchmaker. For 40 years, he spent, fixing watches.
His way of sending a message, no?
Yeah, and it's not scary, but it's spooky, and it's a trick that he would pull.
Yeah. All right, son. I know about watches. Watch this.
Exactly. It was great, though.
I got you. All right, thank you. Yes, in the category of how to get a message across, a watchmaker, you got yourself a new watch, and you didn't stick around for me, huh? Watch this. First-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, Art.
Hi. What is your first name, please?
Randy.
Maybe?
Randy.
Randy. Okay, Randy.
Yeah, Randy from Seattle. Hey, in 1995, I was a Marine Lance Corporal stationed in Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station in Hawaii.
Yeah.
The island of Oahu.
Yes, tough duty.
Yeah, I was,
I was being
do a lot of duty.
Hawaii is a pretty good place to get stationed.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. But I do a lot of duty on the back gate.
Uh-huh.
We called it Bravo Gate. And that was from about 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And it get spooky a lot. You know, you'd sit out there by yourself.
Yeah.
And,
the islands are spooky anyway. You know, they're naturally that way.
Yeah, and the island that base was built on was supposedly a meeting place in the old days for Hawaiian chiefs, and there's a lot of burial mounds and that sort of thing out there. But
I know.
You'd sit out there late at night, and you'd kind of hear things, you know, and I'd hear what I thought were voices and things like that. And one night, I thought I was really spooked, and I heard maybe a voice or something say, "Hey," 2 or 3 times, you know, kind of a few minutes apart. Just, you know, maybe it was my imagination or something, but so I called another MP friend of mine to come out, and, you know, they come out and bring you dinner,
yes,
sort of thing, and got to talking to him about it, and he didn't seem very surprised at all, and he said a couple years prior, he'd been part of he said he used to hear the same sort of thing himself. He'd actually heard his name called. His name was Jason, and he heard his name called a few times, and he'd been part of a work. Actually, an MP had killed himself on that back gate a couple years prior, and he'd been part of the working party that had been assigned to clean up the mess out of the restroom that was right across the street.
Oh.
And
so the death had been right there.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting story. He said that that since the base was on a peninsula, there was 2 approaches from the front and back gate. He said at the time there was an MP on the front gate and the back gate, and their plan had been to kill their watch commander and then kill themselves. And the whole plan had kind of gone wrong, and the MP on the back gate has ended up killing himself anyway.
Yeah, here we are again. These suicides, a really disproportionate number of the calls this morning have really involved suicides, and then appearances or continuing appearances. And so there's another one, folks. There obviously is something very, very much wrong with committing suicide, with choosing to end your own life. That would seem to earn you a period of time, if not eternity, doing something. You're beginning to see a pattern here. Not an absolute pattern, but nevertheless a pattern. The relatives, they either make an appearance, or dead bodies washing up on the shore make an appearance, or we get an appearance for one of many reasons. But one thread that seems obvious tonight, I mean absolutely obvious, is those who take their own lives appear to say exactly where they are, probably doing exactly what they were doing at the time. And I don't know about you, but the prospect of doing that bad, evil thing for eternity, and you know, that eternity is a very, very long time indeed, right? It's forever. So, if you're listening tonight, then you're hearing that same pattern, and if anything would ever discourage anybody from taking their own life, that certainly would be it. And if you throw in a murder and something really evil in the process, then I think it's more likely than ever to happen. All right, well, you're listening to Ghost AM 2003 from the high desert in the middle of the night with the wind howling out there. I'm Art Bell.